Welcome back to another episode of This Week in Indies, where the fun never stops. Also, happy National Novel Writing Month. In this episode, we explore what goes into the first chapter. Are there specific things that should be present? Is there a specific formula to follow? How do we make our first chapter grab our audience? Then, CL Canning comes along with this episode's Indie Connection with books completed during NaNoWriMo in the past. Then get ready for some fun as we enter the 5-minute drill. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for a fun episode. Here's your host for this week's episode, Madilynn. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first week of This Week in Indies featured in NaNoWriMo month. I am excited for this month, and I am excited for the topic we've got today. We've got a great group of panelists on board for you guys, and feel free to drop questions in the chat. While I've got your attention, though, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And also, if you are watching from Facebook, since we stream to multiple platforms, send a star to let our hosts and producers know how much you appreciate what they do here at Go Indie Now. Every time you contribute, you get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. But yeah, without further ado, let me bring in our great panel, and then we'll move right into conversation. Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
So we're going to go around the board and let you introduce yourself, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about what you write, and if you're participating in NaNo this month. You totally don't feel pressured to have to join up if you're not. But we're going to start right here with Mr. Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan B. Fierce. I'm a horror short story writer. I have a few things out. I did start actually in my writing career at NaNoWriMo. No, easy for me to say. And I did start a novel the first time around, and it's still incomplete. So you can tell where my attention span lies. I was going to participate in NaNoWriMo this year, but unfortunately, sudden mandatory overtime at my work kind of blew that out of the water, and I haven't written a lick so far in 5 days this month. I still plan on trying to get something done, of course, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yes. All right, Sean.
SM Hillman professionally, just Sean to most people. You can find my stuff, over there at thewickedvoice.com. I have not updated my Blue Sky social media there yet. I'm a speculative fiction writer. I released a collection of short stories earlier this year called The Language of Skeptics. And I'm also a con volunteer at Jordan Con, Multiverse Con, both of which are have a strong literary connection.
Okay, and then we're going to drop down to October. Sorry. I'm changing it up.
Yeah, I'm October. Most of my friends do call me Toby. And I'm primarily a fantasy writer, but I also write comics. I have a featured webtoon that is supposed to be coming out later this year. Fingers crossed. And I actually have a fantasy novel out right now titled City of Day that I wrote during NaNoWriMo in 2018. So my book is a NaNoWriMo book. And I'm writing another one right now. I am participating in NaNo in a weird way. My goal is to finish the first draft. And it's probably going to be longer than 50,000 words. So my goal is to do a chapter a day for 21 days.
Nice. That's a good goal. Rosie.
Hi, I am Rose, and I'm actually a contemporary romance ghostwriter. So I write novels that other people publish, but I'm also querying a holiday romance that I actually wrote during NaNoWriMo last year.
Ooh.
And I am participating in NaNoWriMo. I have my Nano shirt on. And I am a municipal liaison, which means I help organize a region for NaNoWriMo. And I've been doing that for about 9 years and participating for about 14. So it's kind of a big part of my life. And aside from that, I also help mod a big writers Discord called We Write at Dawn. And we have lots of cool people there who it's a great community where we get to like share and, talk about stuff like this and how to write first chapters and things. So I'm super excited to, be here today.
And last but least, so Michael, you're kind of joining us a little late. I'm really glad you could make it. We're telling everybody who we are, what we write, and just a little bit about ourselves before we dive into conversation. So you are up,
awesome.
my friend.
Awesome, I'm up. All right, so sorry I'm late. I totally forgot about it. I had a big event yesterday, so that's part of who I am. I do a lot of different things. In terms of writing, I write nonfiction, dystopian sci-fi, and children's books. So those are the three projects that I'm on right now. I have 2 kids. I've been writing since I can remember. I really started writing my actual writing as an author in 2019. And ever since then, I've just been trying to grow, and I've been juggling, multiple entrepreneurial endeavors. And I'm also a baseball coach. I do a lot of sports. I do a whole bunch of different things. I wear many hats.
Yes, I think we can all reiterate that wearing many hats. I feel like that comes with whatever we do anyway. So guys, several of you mentioned you are doing Nano and aren't. We have a ton of people in the chat this morning. So before we dive into the first question I have for you, let's see, we've got Anita with us. We've got a couple of you guys breaking the fourth wall. El Mingle, Don, Rosie, you both are breaking the fourth wall. Books by Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany. It's Tiffany Vega, guys. So El Mingle, I definitely would like to chat specifically about first lines, as those are so important. Oh, they are. And Joe is hanging out, lurking and watching. And that is actually a great place to start. Toby breaking the fourth wall as well. So let's talk about that first line, because that is a great place to start with this. Anytime you open a book, you go to that first line, and that's going to either hook you or not hook you. What kind of tips do you guys have for creating that first line that hooks? And I know we all write in multiple different genres, like we have our specialties. So if you want to be genre specific for yours, share that too. So who wants to jump on the ball first?
I'll go. I think being a short story author, you have to grab people's attention much quicker. So that sort of gives me a little bit of an advantage. One way I think of to actually come up with something that's going to catch somebody's attention is I imagine myself walking into a conversation. If it's something that'll make me do a double take, then that's a good hook.
Yeah, that is a great one. I have to agree with that.
I once took a class taught by Dave Farland, who is no longer with us. And he said that there are 5 separate hooks that you can use: setting, character, conflict, emotional, and thematic. And thematic is my favorite example because he said Pride and Prejudice, where you make a really strong statement at the beginning of the book. Like, it is well known that a man with a fortune wants a wife is a thematic statement.
Ooh, that's
Right.
a good point. Yeah.
So I think for me, the first line, it does have to catch the reader's attention, but it also has to set not just for the first chapter, I guess, which we'll get into in a minute, but it has to set expectations for the entire story. If it's a short story, especially, it's got to set that expectation very quickly. Of the kind of tone, I think it sets tone, and I think it sets the kind of characters that you're going to be running into, even if you don't explicitly mention a character. I know a lot of my first lines tend to be thoughtful as opposed to action oriented. Although I've used those in the past as well. And I just think that that's the thing. It's immediate. The immediate tone of the story. You set that for the reader, and I think that hooks them in a way that I think that hooks them very quickly to whether they'll want to be in this or read the rest of the story or not.
Yeah.
So I think I've had an interesting experience with that. So in terms of me as a reader, I was never one who like speculatively picked up a book and had to be hooked from that first sentence. I would kind of go into it knowing I wanted to read this book. I got a lot of background, so really I think the discussion we're going to have on first chapter is going to be something that hits home for me, because I would really read all the way through before I would make that decision for that first chapter. But in terms of me as a writer, I've learned that you got to hook those readers. That's what you're taught, and that's what everything in the industry is telling you. I think I've taken it on multiple different vantage points, but I really like to start that action right at the beginning. I think that comes into play more so. That's why I'm saying it's different for me as a reader versus a writer, because I think me writing, I have so many things going on. I realize, I need to get it done, and I want this action to happen, and I want it here and now. So I'm doing that both with my fiction as well as my nonfiction. And then I'm thinking back to my children's book, and I realized, I did the same exact thing. So I think I really started with the action right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So I think I kind of feel like Michael, as a reader, I'm willing to give a book a chapter, 2 chapters to kind of see what's going to set up. But, as a writer, I feel like it's just ingrained in my brain to think, oh, this first line, this first, paragraph has to be something that, catches attention and makes the reader be like, yeah, this is interesting. I'm going to see what's going to happen now, because, as a romance writer, do you set up the meet cute in the first chapter? Do you set it up in the first 3 chapters? Do you set it up in the first line? So there's that kind of question there of, do you set up that sort of interaction there, or do you just set up an internal conflict or an external conflict that whoever the first chapter point of view character is having at that time? So, and it kind of varies depending on the story you're telling and, what you want to have the reader questioning, like what question you want the reader to be asking as soon as they open the book.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because a lot of times the genre does kind of like play a specific kind of thing in it. Because I too start a lot of mine. I went from kind of like a slow beginning to now I start like in an action scene, like something's going on. And I've kind of learned more for the short story stuff, because that's not been my strongest suit, how important it is to get them hooked right away and just move along in the story. Because I tend to get wordy. So, yeah.
But the first line, in my opinion, is not as important as the first 16 lines. The first 16 lines are almost always guaranteed to be in print on your first page, and that's actually how long you have. Like, you can have not the strongest first line, but if you have a good starting paragraph, that can make a difference. But you've got, like, a little bit of time. A little bit more time than just that first sentence.
That's true, because as a reader, I'm kind of with Michael, but I'm going to read further before I just set the book down. So with that first chapter, do you guys typically do you typically jump into what is going to set up the main problem, or do you provide more background in the start of it? If that makes sense. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, I could start, I think. So yeah, with my nonfiction, I write a lot about I specifically write books that try and connect people with educational and service opportunities around the world. So I have to kind of put more of that background in it. I kind of try and focus on, the big picture of why this is important, and why you should continue reading. In terms of the fiction, I think I kind of just lost my train of thought right there. Yeah, let's just stop with that because I forgot what I was saying. So let's move on.
It happens to the best of us. So
when I'm writing those first chapters, I want to introduce a conflict, maybe not necessarily the main conflict, but if there is a problem that will lead to the conflict, that's one of my favorite things to set up. It's one of the things that I did in City of Day, where I've got a big problem. It's literally life or death stakes in chapter 1, but then that problem leads to the actual overarching conflict of the trilogy, and it's not the main problem.
ooh, that's awesome.
And I think you have to at least hint at the overall conflict, what that might be, whether you set that up sort of. I mean, a lot of your readers understand the idioms of speculative fiction already, so you can use that. You can use tropes or little idioms to kind of give them a hint as to what might be coming. I think that other than tone, which I mentioned before, you do have to also set up the. I don't necessarily set the stakes, but I think that you should at least allude to what might be coming in terms of how intense the story is going to be, how detailed it's going to be, if you're going to play into or away from, you can like go at a trope in a hard way or go hard away from it. Both of those are excellent ways to handle those idioms. I think that, but I think you just have to let people know that something's coming, even if not specifically what it is that's coming.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, whether I set up conflict or some more background kind of depends on the genre I'm writing in. I've been mostly living in the romance world lately, but before that, I wrote a lot of fantasy. So one of my fantasy works in progress is a high fantasy based kind of loosely on the video game Bloodborne, which is a really intricate kind of Lovecraftian eldritch horror video game. So I wanted to have some action to show that, oh, hey, there are like these creepy monsters and stuff and people are trying to survive, but also kind of set up that world as well. But for romance, then I usually try to set up the conflict for the character. The romance I'm writing right now is mostly first person alternating point of view. And I usually start with the female character's point of view. So, what is her conflict at that point in time? And then the second chapter, we usually jumps into the male point of view and sets up what is going on there. And then later on, we'll see how those two conflicts kind of converge and if they're going to be opposing conflicts or if they'll work together, and how they're going to overcome both their own personal conflict and the overarching conflict that affects both of them.
Yeah. And we've got a couple more people that have joined us. I'm going to pause this for a second because we've got Blushing Crafter joined saying hi. El Amigo says, I have tried to create first lines that provides an overview of the story. Ramil always wanted to tell the story of the crypt dancer and of the massacre and of the witches. Vanessa's hanging out with us. Rosie says, hi, Vanessa. And Joe says, I spend more time on my first line than I do in the middle of the book. Could be why it takes me an Olympics to complete one. LOL. Ale Mingle says, I start with a character and a hook. I don't start with action. I build and draw the reader into the story bit by bit. That's a good method to go to. I think too much action in chapter 1 can be exhausting as the reader is not yet connected to the characters and needs the plot to unfold gradually. And then Joe's adding, hey, all the newest thing that YouTube is doing is if you are in the chat, the little emoji button right at the bottom of the chat, the heart, please click on one of those emojis. It helps get this show seen. So please do that, guys. And Vanessa's got a great question. What are the situations where you would or wouldn't want to start in media res? Are there specific reasons to use it or not in your first scene chapter? And then I think if you're going to write an action-oriented piece from Sean in media res is important. It can also be good for setting up characters. So let's come back to this. What are y'all's thoughts on this question? And Sean, you can feel free to lead it since you responded in the chat if you want to.
Sure, absolutely. I think if your piece, short story or novel, novella, whatever, is going to be, I say heavy on the action. I don't want people to think that just constant running gun battle. I mean, that's fun too, but I think the story's a lot of momentum, right? That's moving quickly, that's fast paced, that's leaner on the dialogue, heavier on the description, or heavier on the actions. Something's going fast. In media res gets everyone in that mode, right? Again, I guess it gets back to tone, right? But also, I think it's good for setting up characters. You find out a lot about a person in moments of stress and in moments of and how they react to danger, or something as simple as, oh my gosh, my steak in the pan is on fire because it got lit on fire. How do they react to that? Do they put the fire out, or do they panic, or they knock the steak into the floor? Now the apartment's on fire. Anything like that. So I think that it's a good way to set up characters. I also think it's a good way to set up, for instance, if you're going to kill off an important character right away, in media res is the way to do it. So that character is important for the other characters, obviously, in the story. So
Yeah.
those are all ways in which I'd use in media res.
All I can think about is that this is me. You may be wondering how I got here, and I think that's a really good way to open a comedic toned piece in media res.
Yeah.
You see it all the time, and it works. It's like one of those tropes that you're like, it's a little silly, but I like it.
Yes, I have to agree, because those get me every time, and I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. Like, yeah. Anyone else want to add into that before we move forward?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. So I actually did that, but I did it from not a comedic stance. I did it in a much more morose tone. But granted, my Keeper 829, my dystopian sci-fi, is post-apocalyptic, and I wrote it from the first person present. And actually, that one I wrote from first person past, but I wrote that I used that in media res to set up. I actually used a prologue, and I set her in a kind of philosophical sense, where she was thinking about the actions that had happened and led her to this point, and that really set the stage for the opening chapter.
You have to admit, my action scenes are more like in the midst of a conversation, more often than not, and then it moves into so the book that I got 3 awards on recently, for those of you here, I actually was like, yeah guys, I got it. Anyway, that one opens up, they're in a conversation, and then it moves into kind of like a panicky fight scene between them. But yeah, it's, I don't know, that just kind of, I feel like that one was kind of a different way to open my series versus the other series was a little bit slower. What are some things you feel you've learned since you first started writing that has changed in your first chapter? And this doesn't have to be like the first few paragraphs, like just some of the stuff you started doing differently that seems to work better. Or in first part of the short stories too.
I can chime in on this one. When I first started writing my short stories, or even my novel, and I'm still not that experienced, so I'm not going to try and blow myself up to be this expert or anything. But when I first started writing my short stories, I was just writing them as they would come out of me. But then I started getting feedback from editors saying, put your action as close to the front as possible. So I guess in a short story sense, that's the inciting incident that everybody's wanting, that everybody tells you that you should put in the first chapter. I'm not so sure with a novel that that's necessarily true, because I think you can build that up because you've got room to work with. In a short story, you don't.
Yeah, that is a good point. Do you have more room to work with a novel versus a short story?
I think what I changed is how I write a first chapter, like bare bone basics. I'm not afraid to experiment and try a couple of different openings to figure out which one hits right. So I'll start with something and I'll be like, this isn't working. And I'll just double space and try something completely different. The book that I'm writing for NaNo, I have started 5 different times and I still haven't quite got it yet. So.
I'll say, when I look back at stuff I wrote, like 10 years ago, when I was really just starting to write, I wanted to put all the backstory. I wanted, my first chapters to be, here's, what my character was doing 5 years ago and everything that happened until this point. And, this point, like 10 chapters in, is really where the story needs to start to keep the readers, because all the other stuff can be woven in later. So I think that's something that's really changed for me, is figuring out where the story actually starts for the reader. Like, that's all important information for me to know and to be able to weave in later, but it's not what the first, 5 chapters need to be, giving the main character's entire life story that led them to this point in time.
I think something on that's just so hard, right? Because we work so hard building these stories, and we say it all. I say that with the, I experienced that as well. I kind of had that same journey where I wrote everything out in the first chapter, and I'm fortunate to have a phenomenal editor who went through and worked with me through this process and helped me learn and grow as a writer. I was very expositional. I was extremely vivid in my wrote up, describing it to the point of, the most minute details. And that, for me, it felt like it was my imperative. Like I needed to get that out. You had to understand that to understand where my head was. But after working through it and getting reviews and talking to my editor, talking to other beta readers and other authors, I've learned, like you were just saying, it can be woven in, and that can be. You have to give the reader that ability, that agency to pick up on those cues.
Yeah.
I think probably I would agree with Rose. For me, the biggest 2 things really: less is more. You can first chapter shouldn't be overwhelming, and less more, right? And don't cheat and make. Although I'm writing a story where I'm kind of cheating that way, don't. In general, don't cheat and make chapter 1 a prologue. If you got a prologue. Chapter 1 should, most of the time, and that's why we have rules, we could break them, but should most of the time be the same timeline as the rest of the story. Although obviously there are always exceptions to that, but basically less is more and less lore in the first chapter.
Yeah. And we've got some comments in the chat. Chat is going crazy, guys. Love it. Vanessa said, I tend to start many of my stories in media res, so I asked that because I wonder what aspects influence a decision not to start in media res. AL says, I think every story is different, and the story can often dictate the opening. When I start the story, it often turns into the middle, and the opening forms later in the process. I agree, AL, that we don't often know what the best opening is till we get further in or even actually finish the story. Joe says, the first line of my 3rd book is that a dead body on the sidewalk, or were you just happy to see me? So I am with Toby. A little humor helps, since my first 2 books opened with a very dark tone. AL says, I stopped writing in chapters on book 3. I write in parts instead. So it took time for my style to emerge. Each part has a mini climax and follows the overall arc. My chapter 1 on my first book started with a very intense scene and then went into the first chapter. I have found my storytelling has evolved over time. Ale Mingle, I found that that's the beauty of your WriteStorm system. You don't think about it. You just write and you can cut and paste and rearrange that way. Everybody go check out Ale Mingle. Yes, Vanessa, my false starts, I seem to start the story over and over again. And I scroll down because there's a ton, guys. I often tell my editorial clients to just write the story to the end, because once you've done that, you have a much better idea of where the beginning actually is. And beginning and middle, I need some opening. I need to know where the story is headed and then figure out how to get there. So how many of you guys have actually gone back and changed the beginning once you've really started going into the story? You want to share why, like what, where it was going? Now I see the hands. You're like, yes, good. So, let's go first.
I mean, I guess one of the reasons that I've changed the beginning of my story is because I realized that in one case, I wrote from the wrong point of view. I had to go back and completely rewrite the entire book because the side character was really interesting. And I realized that they're actually the main character of the book. And I was writing from the secondary point of view character the whole time. So that's why I had to go back and change that first chapter, was because I messed up the whole thing.
Ooh. Who's next, guys? I know I saw more than one hand. So.
Similar, in my case, I've gone back to change beginning because somewhere between chapter 1 and the rest of the book, or the rest of the story, it became a completely different story. It may have changed main characters, but even if it didn't, it became a completely different story. It's like, okay, so you have to go back and excise or at least massage the first chapter so it's now in line with the rest of the story. And I think that happens to a small degree fairly often. To a large degree, like having to get rid of the whole first chapter is something that happens less often for me. But
I guess I'll say something. Again, short stories. I keep coming back because that's what I know. When I get feedback from editors on things for anthologies or something that I've submitted to, sometimes they'll tell me I should move this part that's in the middle to the top part, and I'll sit there and I'll look at their notes, and I don't understand why, but when I actually do it, I understand it a little bit better then. I'm still in the learning processes myself, so I'm still trying to figure out where my style lies. But I know that if someone gives me advice, I try and listen to it, and then if it doesn't work for me, if it doesn't work for my vision of the story, then I'll put it back to where it was, or I'll change it for a different way.
Yeah, and we're all with you on that, Dan, about the learning process. Writing is a never-ending learning experience, if you think of it that way. Rose, I saw you come off mute a while ago. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the hardest things about being a ghostwriter is I have to write what my client is happy with. And although I hated it, the last book I wrote for her, the first chapter I ended up having to rewrite most of it. I kept some of the later stuff, but I had to cut at least like 2,000 words and rework the whole, middle of the chapter. And while I was like really unhappy that I had to redo all that from this was the first time I'd ever had to really blow up a chapter and restart it. But at the same time, her criticism was valid, and it did end up with being a better first chapter and starting more like in the moment with the conflict and the other stuff that I tried to start at the beginning, I was able to work in later. So it's definitely something that I've had to, evaluate. And again, going back to, is the chapter starting in the right place? Is the story starting where it needs to start? So.
Yeah. Anybody else want to
Yeah.
jump on in?
Yeah, I have some on that. So I've had both experiences where I kind of massaged the first chapter and then also blew up the first chapter. So my first book, Keeper 89, I really got a lot of feedback from my editor, like I mentioned, and I had to go back and change a lot of the narration aspect and really get more into the action sooner because I was too descriptive. So that first chapter really went from a lot of scene setting into I needed to have that action in there. I think book 2, I really learned a lot from that, and I didn't have to go back through and change it too much. But the reason being, I think there's a different experience between how you're writing that really alters whether you have to change that chapter or not. And what I mean by that is, how much time do you take getting this whole book written? How much time is there between when you wrote chapter 1 and you get to the end and you're doing edits? Because you change personally, you change as a person, you change as a writer, your experiences, your point of view, your perspective, all that changes. A lot of things that impact us as writers and things we're experiencing that change our worldview really happen, on a constant. So how much time elapses between, you sitting down and writing and you finishing makes a big difference. And I say that because in book 3, that I'm working on right now, so book 1 took me 3 years to write, book 2 took me 6 months, book 3, I'm sitting around the 1.5 year mark because I have 2 kids, a toddler, that I can't get the time to do it. And I literally took about a 6-month break in between writing on book 3. And when I went back and reread it, I didn't like where I was going. I felt I was falling off the trilogy, and I completely restarted everything. And I mixed those first 6 chapters. And now they're sitting at the end of my document, and I'm wondering if I'm going to trickle them in somewhere, but I completely changed that. And I think that was because, I took that huge break.
Yeah, and having a break will actually let your mind kind of reset, and you see a lot of stuff you missed from the beginning. I'm going to scroll through our chat stuff again here. So we started a while ago. I think in the first draft, the first chapter is often a mess because I'm still feeling the story out, trying to figure out how it's getting where it's supposed to go. Definitely with you on that, Vanessa. I feel that I'm working on the opening. I'm telling the story to myself, and I am meeting the character. Much tends to change as I explore the draft. Yes, I agree, Ale. It's similar for me. And unless it's the overall concept, when I wrote Ballet of the Crypt Dancer, I had a dream that I wanted to flesh out. When I started the story, I had some concepts, but that's all I knew at the time. Oh, yes. So we're going to pick this feedback up after we check out this week's Indie Connection, guys. And there are some books on here that you should absolutely add to your list. And I'll let her video tell you more about them.
Hey guys, CO Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. And I'm back again this year with our NaNoWriMo edition. Today I'm going to be telling you about 4 indie books who started out as NaNoWriMos. The authors wrote them in November of the last 2 years during NaNoWriMo, and then they successfully went on to publish them. So let's check them out. The first book I have for you is called The Fall of Eilon by Samantha Shea. Forced to flee her kingdom, an elvish princess prepares to return and reclaim her birthright with magic, blood, and steel. When the elvish kingdom of Eilon is attacked, Princess Zaristel, the sole heir, is forced to flee. Her mother always told her, when there is war, prepare for death, but she didn't listen. Now she finds herself woefully unprepared for the challenges ahead, until she meets Torin, a spellcaster who has vowed to protect her. As Zar travels with Torin, using her handmaiden's name as an alias, 2 more heroes join their circle. Cagnes, a warrior from Zar's kingdom, who is sent to aid her, and Alric, a bard who has seen too many of the world's evils. Zara has no choice but to trust and let the others in, as she will need their help pursuing the powerful enemy that has destroyed her kingdom. The key to saving Eilon is closer than she knows. Finding it is going to prove difficult. With the fate of her people in her hands, she will stop at nothing to save them, even if it means sacrificing herself. The second book I have for you is called Undying Light by Aurora Wildy. A violent attack could have marked Keela Morrow's end had Taryn Montgomery not intervened. The mysterious stranger with powers of his own saves her, but is badly wounded in the process. Fearing his injuries could prove fatal, Keela risks everything and uses her powers of light to heal him. If discovered, they would be hunted and killed. With their secrets and their lives in each other's hands, Taryn vows to keep her safe. With no other options, Keela reluctantly agrees. Yet there is another. An immortal named Seth Lazarus senses Keela's presence as one of his own kind, the first newly born in millennia. After another attempt is made on her life, Seth offers Keela refuge and a job to keep her close enough to protect her, while searching for a way to teach her about her true parentage. If only Taryn was not standing in his way. No one is what they seem. Danger is closing in from all sides. How can Keela decide who to trust with her life, when the two men protecting her don't even trust one another? The third book I have for you is called A Familiar Witch by A.M. Deese. This is part of the Tales of a Sixth Grade Werewolf series. Trouble is brewing in the town of Tallville. There was a time Felix Wolf didn't believe in magic, and when the biggest challenge of sixth grade was math. Now he's more focused on surviving the enchanting chaos of witches. Join Felix and his friends on an exhilarating adventure discovering just why sixth grade was easier before adding any superpowers to the equation. And the last book I have for you is called Lyra by Claudia Blood. A teenage assassin, a demanding father. What will she do when her most trusted betrays her? Hiding what she wants is second nature to Lyra. Raised as the only child and a lowly daughter of the head of her clan, Lyra dreams of being an assassin. When her father commands the first assassin's class in 20 years to assemble, Lyra jumps on the chance to join them on the sly. When her classmates have gone missing on their late assignment, she is despondent. Mounting evidence suggests the missing class may be linked to something much more personal than she imagined. Desperate, guilty, devastated. Her only recourse is to do the unthinkable. Resort to sabotage to unravel the mystery. Lyra must become the villain to be a hero. Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye!
I always love the books she's got on there, and it like warms my heart to see Claudia's book on there, because Claudia Blood, guys, is like an amazing person. So, and her writing is just as good. But now we're going to shift gears a little bit. What are some things that should not happen in the first chapter, or you don't think you wouldn't recommend, is a better way to phrase that? So, like do's and don'ts, kind of. Now we're on the don'ts.
I think you shouldn't give away the entire ending. Like, it does work in some cases, but it's very rare that you can, like, it takes a lot of skill to pull it off, where you're like, here's the outcome. Now let me go back and explain the thing. And, like, the only example I can think of that it worked was Twilight, where in the very first little prologue bit, she's like, I'm gonna die. And then later she almost dies, you know? Like, yes. You can hint at it, but giving away the whole end of the book is something that's difficult to do, and then still want somebody engaged in the story.
Yes, and Joe adds in, don't end the book, guys. Don't end the book in the first chapter. What are some other things, like?
No kissing in the first chapter. I'm kidding.
Oh, come on, John. You're killing me. That's how mine always.
No kissing books. So no, I think that it kind of gets back to a little bit for a previous question. Not too much lore, right? Don't, as long as not giving out the ending, don't give away too much of the backstory either. You know, and several people said that, but I think it's important. You don't have to talk about Mount Doom and the Ring of Power in the first chapter, right? You can just sort of hint at the adventure to come. You can do all sorts of things with that first chapter that brings people into the world. Oh, this is kind of a cool thing. I want to care about this world. But if you're giving them a history or language, literary lesson in the first chapter, it turns a lot of people off. It turns me off as a reader. I want to be engaged with your characters or your plot, not the backstory in the first chapter.
Yes.
For short stories, you have to draw people in, obviously, but it's just like with novels. You don't want to give too much away, or what fun is that? You definitely don't want to reveal the monster right away, because that will be anticlimactic for your readers. And just give enough to give them a taste of what's to come.
Yeah.
I think I was gonna say what Vanessa has added in chat. You know, don't throw every single one of your characters at the reader at the very beginning. You know, if you have a big cast, you know, then introduce them, introduce the important ones that you need at the beginning, and introduce the rest along the way, because otherwise people are going to be like, wait, who was this? Who was that? Why were they important? I don't remember.
Yeah.
So especially if the names are similar, because a lot of times in fantasy you get, you know, odd names that are made up for the language, or, you know, the characters you have there, and then they're very similar sounding, and it can get really confusing easily if you throw them all at the reader at once.
Yes.
And I want to comment on what A.F. Stewart said about no info dumping in the first chapter. And that is no chunky dumping, I think, is a very important thing, because if you weave some of that information into the story, into the action, and into the narrative, it can work. But when you do it all as one big chunk, that's when the reader is like, all right, how many paragraphs can I skip?
Yeah. I'm guilty of doing that as a reader, I have to admit. And we do have a couple other suggestions too. Deborah Parmley says, don't kill off the main characters, especially in the first chapter, you know. A.L. Meagle says, in my science fiction, I start with a vast, grand, omniscient perspective. Oh, I'm getting tongue-tied. Slowly draw the reader into the story by focusing on a scene or a character. Some have told me not start a story in omniscient. It works in Fight Club too. You end up going back and realizing he gave it all away in the first chapter. We covered Vanessa's and Anita's. Don't slow the pacing with many details before you have earned the trust of the reader. And Joe says Sean just ended all hope of Maddie's writing career blossoming with the kissing comment. So yes. I completely agree with the way you start in the omniscient. I do that as well. Think it helps to draw in from big to small. Michael breaking the fourth wall. Sword leaf cutter versus leaf sword cutter. Sean, you're gonna have to explain that one, because I have no idea what that means. So, and then sword unfolding. Yes, I think it works well based on genre for my sci-fi. I needed to start from a creator overview perspective, but then zooming in like a camera, very visual for the reader. Ooh, yeah.
I was responding to Rose, who said all the confusing names. So
Yes.
you know that's often you'll get names that are very similar like that. So
That is true. Yeah. So, any more things, Michael, Dan, Rose, Toby, Sean, y'all want to add more of like things to don't? Anything kind of like what we saw in the chat bring up? Any more suggestions?
I know I like the comment, "Don't kill a main character in the first chapter." That's unless you're gonna use necromancy to bring them back, or you're gonna turn them into a cyborg or something like that.
We're
That's
a
obviously,
vampire. I mean,
or a vampire.
going in the
Yeah.
paranormal world there.
Yeah.
Zombies. I don't know if anybody's explored that. They're going to become a zombie later on. Kill the first character. Boom. Now they're a zombie. Like that, whatever that what movie, TV series is, where the guy's like a zombie and starts becoming human again.
Warm Bodies. That's exactly what I was just thinking about.
Yeah, I couldn't think of the name of it. I was like, that's kind of like, there you go. There's a reason to kill off a main character. Oops, let me not bring you up, Toby. Just, yeah. So.
Now y'all are giving me ideas.
Hey, that's what some of this is like for. So, and then Vanessa has added, I'm not a fan of omniscient at all. One of the things I love about books is that when things don't work for some readers will work for others. Okay, I was missing a word in there somewhere, but I'm too zoned out to figure out what I missed. Okay, or it's like the telltale heart where it becomes your unraveling. Ooh.
I think there's no hard and fast don'ts. There's, like Vanessa said, there's stuff that's going to work for some readers that's not going to work for others. And there's some things that it takes a lot of creativity or a lot of skill to carry out, but you can do it, like killing a main character or starting with a dead person. We've seen examples where it works. So there's no real hard and fast don'ts. It's experimentation and figuring out what works for you.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
I think I found something that I like to write, and looking back on it, I like reading as well. Those dumps, using dialogue to do that. So finding a way to weave that in at the beginning in that first chapter. There's some meaningful interaction that really unveil what's going on.
Ooh, yeah, some meaningful interactions. I like that. Well, guys, do you have any final thoughts on the first chapter and writing it before we jump into the 5-minute drill? Nope. All right, guys, let's get ready to play some games. And let me switch around here. Pull it up. It always takes me a minute to get this pulled up, so you guys bear with me. Okay. And I'm going to rework our layout. Is this going to work? Nope. Hold on. We're missing people, so hold on, guys. There's too many layouts. Nope. Where did it go? Okay, hold on. Still not. Okay, we're going to go back to this. And I'm going to try to, I don't know. The layout's not here that was here. So, we're going to make it work. Okay, I've got the 5-minute timer going. And, well, let me get it pulled up so I can press start. Too many things on my computer. Okay, guys. So
Honestly,
it's going.
I can't see the timer because my anxiety would start.
Yeah, that's probably a perk then, because I do the same thing. It's like test anxiety. Okay, timer is going. Okay. First question. If you could be a house pet, what would you be? And we're going to start up here with Dan and move all the way through to the bottom. So.
Oh, I'd definitely be a dog, because how great would it be to be able to play in the yard, poop wherever you wanted to, maybe get scolded, get treats, and sleep in a sunbeam all day long.
Nice. Joe hopped in to help. So, Sean, you're next.
I think I would like to be a parakeet or a bird of some sort, because I feel like that would provide a big or a completely different point of view from other animals.
Ooh. Okay. And then Toby.
I want to be a fish, no thoughts, head empty, no pressure. All I gotta do is swim around in circles and eat food.
Nice.
That'd be fine with me. And somebody else takes care of literally everything. Like, I'm absolutely useless, but they love me anyway.
Rose, you're next.
Well, as a cat mom with 8 cats, I think I would have to say a cat because they just have it absolutely made. So
cool. And then Michael.
Yeah, I'm completely with Rose on that. I've always been dog person, but cats seem to have it made. They're contemplating how to take over the world. No one bothers them. So.
Yeah. All right, guys. Question 2. If you could win the lottery and you're the only winner, meaning you get all the money, what would you do with the money?
Well, of course, I'd do the responsible thing and pay bills and stuff like that. But then I'd also have to put some of it towards retirement, because I'm getting closer and closer by the day, and I am not ready.
Yeah.
I would open a couple nonprofits, but I'd still continue. So I would still continue to work, though, no matter how much money it was.
I'd get a house of my own, because right now I'm living in my best friend's basement. I mean, it's a nice basement, don't get me wrong, but and then after that, I'd split the rest between helping my baby sibling pay off college and donating to causes and probably publishing books.
I would pay off my student loans and all my debt and buy a house like in Spain or something and move there and write books and maybe run a writing retreat that people wouldn't have to pay to come to.
Oh, I'd be on board with that.
And I would pay off bills, put a lot aside for my kids, and then found a nonprofit for the work.
Nice. Okay, next question. If you accidentally travel back in time, what time period would you hope to land in?
For me, I think it would be ancient Greece. That always fascinated me. Greece and Roman Empire, but mostly the Greece.
Ooh.
I think for me would be the high point of the Danish Vikings. So,
Nice.
For me, I think I would want to go back to the Gilded Age of America, so 1890s, with the like high streets in New York and everybody making money off of railways.
Ooh.
I've always been obsessed with ancient Egypt, so I would have to say ancient Egypt.
I would go ancient Rome. I was an archaeology major and focused on the Destiny.
Oh, nice. Okay, have you ever participated in NaNo? How did it go?
I have participated in NaNo 4 times, and I've won 3 of them.
I participated since 2008, and I've won 2 of them, I think.
I don't know when I started participating in NaNo because I was in high school, so it's at least over a decade. And I don't know how many of them I have won, but I do it every year just to practice consistency, if nothing else.
I started in 2010 and I've won most years, but not all. So
Yeah, I really just use it as kind of an opportunity to get back on course.
Nice. All right, guys, we have run out of time. So let me fix our awesome layout. Shout out to Joe for like jumping in and like organizing the screen because I was like, oh no. But we're going to go back around. We're going to start in reverse. We'll start down here with Michael and go ahead and tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you, snag copies of your book. And yeah, so I'm going to pull you up.
Okay. Yeah, you can find me at michaelcamarillobooks.com. All my stuff is on there. I'm also on Amazon, but if I direct you over to my website, you'll see blog posts with other authors as well, where I interview various authors, including a number of people here today. And you can also find me on Story Unfolding on my YouTube channel, where I do one-on-one interviews as well.
Sweet. Thank you for hanging out with us on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Rosie.
well, I'm Rose, and you can find my blog at the website link down there, rosies-reverie.com, and a link to all of my social media stuff. I don't have anything published that's not ghostwritten currently, so I can't actually share those titles. But I do a lot of stuff on social media, and like I mentioned earlier, with Discord and running writers groups, and I run a hashtag prompt on Blue Sky called Whip Snips, where you can share a snippet every day based on the word that I post that day. So come on out and hang out in the writing community with me.
Sweet. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And hi, I'm October K Santarelli. You can find me online at octoberksantarelli.com. You can also find me on the Falstaff website. They are my current publisher, and my book City of Day just got a brand new cover, so it's stellar and so pretty. So I'd go and order a copy if I were you.
Yes, and thank you for joining us today. Sean?
You can find a link to Language Skeptics at thewickedvoice.com, along with my social media. You can find me on the Go Indie Network on Zero Means You Dead, which is an RPG podcast, number 2 is coming out later this month, as well as Hit the Dice, which is where we sit down and actually play a game for 2 hours. And on Facebook, I'm the co-mod or the mod. I'm the executive officer, I guess, for the Writing Tribe, which Vanessa leads. So if you're on Facebook, or even if you're not on Facebook, get on Facebook and come join us as the Writing Tribe.
Yes. Then Dan, you're still muted, my friend.
There we go. I've just posted a link tree in the chat room. You can also find me on www.fiercephantoms.com. It's Phantoms, Phantoms. That's my WordPress page. And like I said, the link tree is in the chat, although it's grayed out. I don't know why. Maybe the chat's dead for now.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure.
All right, guys. I am Madilynn Dale, the Chapter Goddess. You can find all of my stuff at my website, thechaptergoddess.com. I'm frequently on Go Indie Now with a lot of stuff, and there is a lot going on this week in Go Indie Now. From Character Driven with me on Wednesday to all kinds of good, fun episodes. You guys, there's never a dull moment on this channel. So hit that like button and subscribe so you can know when we're going live again or when shows are posted. Also, to make it a little bit easier on you guys, all of these authors' links are in the description, so you can check them out and go to their websites, go snag a copy of their books. Every single one of them has worked hard and created some amazing products. If you are participating in NaNo this month, good luck. And I hope you win. If not, stick with it. Keep your head up because your story is still coming to fruition. But yeah, thank you again for joining us this morning. And remember, it's always time to go indie now.